Hello, students. Welcome back to our next topic in our study of science this year. And we're winding down. We only have two more topics to go. This is topic number 23, which we will be discussing throughout this week. And as usual, I'll be providing you some brief lessons and then also directing you to some additional videos to watch to help supplement what I will be sharing with you for your notes. So let's get started with this week's topic, biodiversity. Biodiversity. Uh, as we have grown accustomed throughout the year of dissecting words, let's do that with this word, bio, B-I-O. What does it refer to? I know you know, living things. Diversity refers to differences. So biodiversity has everything to do with differences of living things, but more specifically, as we define it in our books, biodiversity describes the variety and variability of life on Earth. That's a cool little picture there. If you look at it, they've got the whole world in their hands. And if you notice, there's lots of different plants and animals and other kinds of critters all rolled up into one. Earth is unique in many regards. One reason why Earth is so unique is because, well, you and I are here. Yeah. But we wouldn't be here if Earth was not habitable for living things. We have such an incredible biodiversity here on planet Earth. There is such variety and variability of living things, things that can be found in glacial ice atop the tallest mountains, and organisms that feed upon the chemicals coming out of thermal vents at the bottom of the oceans and everywhere in between. Earth is incredibly teeming with all sorts of different kinds of life. But there are threats to that biodiversity. Here's a brief map that I would like to draw your attention to. And if you look at it, this is a map of what's called the Biodiversity Threat Map. And the closer to the red areas, and if you look at the legend here, we go from blue to red. Red areas are the areas where there is the greatest threat to biodiversity, and the blue areas are areas where there is, at least currently, the least threat to biodiversity. And if you look at the red areas on planet Earth, you may notice that they coincide with a population density of one species on our planet. You may have guessed it already. That's right. Those red zones on this map are areas where there is a high population density of human beings. Yeah, if you could put it simply, human beings are essentially the greatest threat to biodiversity on planet Earth. And there are a variety of reasons for that, which we'll be getting into this week. But first, let's focus on three types of diversity, because biodiversity in and of itself is also diverse. And we're going to discuss three different types of biodiversity. Number one is called taxonomic or species diversity. And this describes the variety in the number of species. So I've given you a couple diagrams here to look at. And this is kind of an analogy for us to examine. I have given you these two pictures to compare with colored stars on them. Each different colored star represents a different species. So you can see over on the left, there's the red, yellow, blue, white, and green star species. Now, my question to you is, looking at these two pictures, in which picture, the one on the left or the one on the right, is there a greater variety in the number of species? Call it out. Perhaps you said the one on the right. And if you did, you're correct, because check it out. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different colors, which represents 5 different species. But over here on the right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 different colors representing 10 different species. So there is a greater variety, a species diversity or taxonomic diversity over on the right-hand side than there is on the left-hand side. Do you see that? Now, let me try and present it in another way, referring to actual living things in the plant species. I'd like you to look at these two diagrams, A and B. These are two different forests. And I'd like you to see if you can identify which one of these forests has the greatest taxonomic or species diversity. Take a moment to look at it, A and B. Which one has the greatest taxonomic diversity? Call it out when you think you know. All right. Sounds like many of you are opting for Forest A. Well, why would you choose that? Well, let's look at B first. If we look at Forest B, here's one type of tree species which is predominantly found in this forest. So that's one species. Here's a second species, a third species, and a fourth species. So in Forest B, there are 4 different species. Now look at Forest A. Let's see, we've got one species here, 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 here. Here's one. Here's 2 species here, here. Here's 3 species. And here's 4 species. Well, do you see a 5th? No. Well, check that out. How many of you were fooled? They both have, I know this was a trick question. I'm sorry for tricking you, but they both have the same number of different species. So they both have the same taxonomic diversity. But remember, this isn't the only kind of diversity. And certainly there is a greater distribution of different species in Forest A and a greater concentration of one species in Forest B, but they both have the same taxonomic diversity. So keep that in mind. Let's go to the next one here. The next one, number 2, is ecological diversity. Ecological diversity is the variety in the number of ecosystems. And you have to think way back when we studied ecosystems to know that an ecosystem is an area where it is a combination of the biotic and abiotic components, the living and the non-living parts of the environment. That's what an ecosystem is. So ecological diversity describes the variety in the number of ecosystems. And you'll see this interesting triangular chart here, and it's illustrating different types of ecological diversity in different zones of the earth, from tundra near the Arctic regions to the tropical regions of our planet. I think this next diagram shows ecological diversity really well. Imagine you're taking a trip across the United States or North America, and you're going from, let's say, the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. If you were just to drive in a straight line, you would come across a lot of ecological diversity. Our nation is chock full of different ecosystems. Starting in the west, we've got the coastal mountain ranges, a particular type of combination of living and non living components in that ecosystem. Then we've got the mountains, the Great American Desert, the Rocky Mountains, the Great Plains, the Mississippi Valley, and here where we live, the Appalachian Mountains, before we get down to the coastal region again. And so you can see that this cross section of our own country has quite a bit of ecological diversity and a variety of elevations on which those different ecosystems exist. So that's the second type, ecological diversity. The third type of diversity is called morphological. That's a big word, morphological or genetic diversity. We just got finished basically with several topics dealing with genetic diversity. And morphological or genetic diversity can be described as the variety that exists within a species. So check this out. This picture should be familiar to you. Do you recognize Darwin's finches and the different beaks, and how we've learned in the recent past how there is always a lot of diversity within a species, and the more diverse a species is, the better, as far as the natural selection within that species to allow certain members of that species to procreate and to produce another generation. So here's another great picture, I think, of this type of morphological or genetic diversity. Check out all of these frogs. Frogs are quite a diverse group of organisms. They're all frogs, but there's a lot of diversity among frogs. Now, granted, there are many different species identified here, but they all belong to the same genus. Rhanus is the genus for froggy. Uh, but look at all of the variety here with it. Sorry about that. I just moved the picture. I was so excited. Let's click that back into position. There we go. But look at the variety of all of these frogs. And actually, each column here represents a different species. So here's one species. Here's two species, three, four, five, six different species. Notice the variety within those individual species. I think that is a pretty cool, colorful picture. And but let's continue, shall we? Actually, you know what? Why don't, that's such a beautiful picture. And I have another video I want to show you. So why don't we just pause it there for now? And I'll say, as usual, bye bye.